Hey folks, this is Totally and welcome to some more game dev. Coming back here again, looking at skill items once again today. Volume seems a bit loud. We're gonna double check real quick. Hold on. There we go. That seems closer to right. Okay. Let's try that again. Hey folks, this is Totally and welcome to some more game dev. We're coming back today looking at skill items once again. Last weekend we kind of did some work setting up some items in Infinite Retries to defeat the Demon Lord. Specifically trying to create some crystals that we would then use to be able to unlock skills inside of our level up screens. And I think there's still more work to be done here. And I wanted to come back and continue where we left off. So kind of just showed it just now, but essentially we got to the point where we can give ourselves some crystal shards. We need to fix that so the ability doesn't delete itself. But when you kill the enemy, it drops an ability on the ground or a prop that you can then walk over and gain crystals, and those crystals will appear in our skill screen, and you can spend those crystals along with skill points you earn from leveling up your skills to be able to unlock new nodes. And I think that's basically what we got set up in 2 streams last Sunday. What is it complaining about here? There's an invalid key. Oh, you know what? Let's fix that. Small detour. We're going to go into the skill screen, because this was being annoying last week as well. This is just a old bug in which this UI up here is trying to load up an old ward image that I guess we no longer have. And so we need to change this to point to something else. So if we look at not skill background, I think it is skill info, stats. One of these should be information for the character portrait. So if we open this up, this is trying to load the unit's full unit portrait ID information, which I'm going to guess by default is not set inside of our player. We can take a quick look at the player, and we're looking for the ID Pt.3 player. This unit here does not have a full portrait addressable ID set. So let's give it one just so that it'll stop complaining. We're going to quickly create a character portrait. In fact, we might even be able to use an existing one. If we close up audio, go under content, art, character portraits, and then grab this one, hero hello. This may not match perfectly, but we can at least have it stop complaining if it finds something to load. It used to be that this was like a full standing image of the character, but we can just use Hero's face potentially just to get rid of the error message. No, still getting it. Yeah, the addressables are failing. Invalid key exception. Okay. So let's go take a quick look at what's going on there. So full unit portrait. Oh, I think I changed the wrong one. That's all. So once we get this fixed, we're going to then go back to looking at the actual item pickups. There's a couple of bugs that I guess we can literally continue from where we left off on. Yeah, we want to put this in here, I guess. And we can resolve some of those bugs, and then I'd like to try and set it up so that we can have multiple different skill items, one for each type of node. So like we can have an item for picking up or for unlocking strength-based nodes, and an item for unlocking defense-based nodes. That works. The other option would have been to just remove the image entirely. See if we can make it fit. If we go find that image, lots of props, looking for hero hello, drag that in. What if we just turn it off? Would that also, it'll probably still load it in the background now that it has valid string, so it won't complain with an error, but we won't have to worry about lining all the UI up. At least not today. Perfect. No errors. Good. Happy. Because honestly, I think I want to do a bit of an overhaul, because we can see that when we're going back and forth between these screens, it like jitters because it's moving this down as the camera moves down, and they're just not in sync. So I think I want to change the way this UI looks anyways. So I don't want to spend a ton of time resetting this up with a new portrait. Okay, so let's fix the bugs from last week to start with. So if we come into here and we defeat this slime and we step here, we get crystal found. But if we step away and then step back, we will keep getting crystals because we have no system of saying this ability has been used, essentially. When we put a ability on a tile, nothing tells that ability to ever remove itself. So we need to figure out a way of doing that. So the way this works is we have on enter tile abilities, and there's a list of these, and when the player steps onto that tile, or when anything steps on that tile, the ability on that tile will check to see if it can target whatever's just entered that tile, and if it can, it will perform that ability and add it up to a response manager that waits until the current enemy is done moving, or the turn is essentially over. Depending on the response type, it'll insert that ability at a specific moment. So we need a way of removing the ability from this list after it's activated. So I think the simplest version is going to just be a temporary list to hold some abilities. And we can have this be to remove, and then the to remove list can add any abilities, and afterwards it can remove those abilities from the tile on enter ability list. Cool. The only question now is, how does an ability know, like, do we do this always? Is that base functionality? We don't really have a lot of examples of this. Unlockable characters with the hydration, appreciated. Early on, make sure that I actually have the water, which I do. Okay. I don't think I want to have this happen every single time, because we might have like a damaging ability or something that might want to remove itself not on trigger, but after some duration. But we don't have a lot of different types of on enter abilities set up currently. Really, the only ones we have outside of now the items is the exiting the map is also an on enter tile ability that causes us to change scenes, basically. So I think I want some way of knowing inside of the ability itself whether or not this ability should remove itself. We already have a response priority that we're associating with an ability, which is only used inside the tile. So it feels a little bad to put extra logic inside of here, but I think it'll be fine for now. Should remove on activate. We're going to leave that false by default. And we will wrong spot. Where were we? Here. If the ability should remove on activate, it'll add it to the remove list. And then we're using a generic ability for entering onto the tile. What did we call that? Simple item pickup. We can just tick this box now. And then after it's activated one time, it should remove itself from the list. We're not cleaning it up though, because we are addressably, like using addressables to load the object, and we're not releasing it, but that's fine. We have another system that kind of handles any loose ends like that. Okay, so we get the shard. Ah, it is still multi-activating. Okay. So this did not work. If should remove on activate, remove. Can I see the simple item pickup? I don't think so, because we're... Oh, we are cloning it. Where does it end up? Oh, it ends up on the tile itself. Okay, and it does have should remove on activate ticked. So then we just need to debug and try and figure out what's going on. What am I not processing? We step onto here. Ability should remove on activate is false in this situation. Oh, we are not using the simple version. We're using loot item pickup cutscene. I thought we had switched over to using the simple version. Oh, we're opening too many tabs. Oh, I see the problem. Okay. So, even though it's spawned simple, it looks like internally we're using loot item. Oh, right. So simple item pickup was the version that we made last week where you actually had to interact to pick up the item. Loot item pickup cutscene was one that we made very quickly at the end of the last stream where we could just step onto it. So we want this one. Now it's getting added to the list to be removed. And now it's no longer activating. Okay. It still exists as a item, so we should also clean it up and delete this object. But when we switch scenes, it'll also get deleted. So it's kind of getting auto cleaned up just on scene change. At least if I understand Unity correctly, which I don't often do, so there may be an issue, but I'm sure I will find it in the future if it becomes a problem. Alright, so that should be good enough to fix that bug. I don't love it, but it does what it needs to do for today. The next thing is getting multiple items in here. So if we go to our data, we had this spreadsheet and we added one new item type, which was skill node item, which we named crystal shard, made it a consumable type, has a buy and a sell cost, which we're not using, and we don't use any properties for it. No particles, no stat modifications. Okay, yeah. So that's all fine. So we could make a couple more of these. So we can make a... I guess this is where we get into design work, where it's like, how do I want to break these down? When we come into this skill screen, I want there to be a couple of different items that you need to gather in order to unlock your skills in the skill tree. And like my main reference point is thinking about like Final Fantasy X sphere grid. And I think they use power and magic. I'm going to do a quick Google search on the side here. Final Fantasy X's power spheres. Got it. Oh, there's way more spheres than I remember. Okay, let's bring this over to Balsamic. Let's make a new page. Okay, well, we're gonna copy one of these because I can't remember how to make a new one from scratch. FF10's spheres. Okay, so looks like FF10 had a couple of different sphere types. It had power, mana, speed, ability, fortune. Okay. This was for strength, defense, and HP spheres. And the mana was for magic, power, magic, resistance. We'll do resist. And MP. Then speed was agility, accuracy, and evasion. And then ability was for skills, special, and magic, which is basically there are 3 different types of abilities. And then fortune was only for luck nodes. And that was red spheres. They also had key spheres, which are the other ones that I did remember, which are level 1 through 4. Then it had purple spheres, which were basically 1 per stat type. Rather than typing every single one out, but it had 1 for HP, strength, defense, magic power, magic resist, MP, agility, evasion, accuracy, and luck. So everything except for the actual abilities themselves. All the actual stats had a purple sphere associated with them. And then they had yellow, which was used for Attribute any stat unlock. Special any special node. Skill any skill. White magic any white magic node. Oh, I was like, how is attribute better than just using a power sphere? But when this says any, it means anywhere on the entire grid. And then master sphere any node. So the yellows were basically wild cards that let you activate something anywhere on the grid. And then light blue were a variety of teleports. Teleport spheres. And then last but not least, they had one special clear. Spear is no longer looking like a word to me. Okay, is that right? Clear any stat node. Interesting. Amorphous with the hydration redeem. Hello and welcome in. It's going pretty good. We're continuing where we left off last weekend. Basically trying to add some items to our skill screen, not unlike Final Fantasy X's system, where we're trying to add just a couple of different items that are going to be needed to unlock different types of nodes. Primarily, I'm just prototyping this idea because I feel like there's not anything that I can really give the player in the current design. And so adding a layer of items required to unlock the skills is mostly just giving me something that I can give out. And they don't need to be super rare, but I just want to be able to have enemies drop stuff, or for us to be able to have chests in the environment that we can have the player find to get something. Because right now I'm building dead ends in the map, and I'm just finding I don't have a lot to put in those dead ends to reward the player with. So adding a mechanic to the skill screen where you need these nodes, even if they're very plentiful and you almost never run out, will just give me something to be able to give the player. A little bit of a ooh, piece of candy moment. I don't know if it'll work. I'm still a little concerned it might start to feel tedious having to both level up and gain skill points and have these crystals in order to be able to unlock these nodes. But I'm going to keep moving forward and we'll test it out and see if it works. And if it doesn't, we can always get rid of it. Ooh, new fun bug. Oh, right. I really should have double checked the stream from last week because I remember we ran into these near the end of the last stream, but it looks like we can't kill the same enemy multiple times in our little test space and get items to drop. Is that what the issue here is? This bug's actually to do with the hit notification system, which is unrelated to the item stuff we're working on today. I'm not sure. No, this is related because we've spawned the prop and then we delete it, or we don't actually even delete the prop, we just disable it but by then killing the slime again, we create another prop with the exact same ID. Yeah, so this doesn't work. Oh, also you can't spawn a slime while there's already a slime alive. This is only a test space, so some of these bugs I'm not super concerned about because you'd never be able to kill the same enemy twice in a normal playthrough. So like the fact that the second item the slime drops breaks in here isn't the worst. It is just mostly annoying for our testing purposes, which might be enough for us to want to fix this. It does look like it will continue to drop more items. It's just not properly disabling the prop as we get more and more duplicates of it. Where did we write that code? Yeah, last week we wrote the in here spawn prop. Right, loot script. Okay, and the loot script gets an entity ID that is based off of that unit's ID underscore loot. And this ID is coming from the entity ID of the enemy spawner. So in order for this to remain unique, we could try and like track the number of times the enemies died in our combat testing space and add the death count to this ID so that it remains unique. Thanks for dropping in, Amorphous. Hope you have a good day at work. Things have been steady. I feel like I have not touched the project since last stream last week, and like that is getting me a bit sad. Like sometimes throughout the week I'm like, man, I wish I had more time. But the fact that we've started doing like Sunday dev streams has meant that I haven't gone months without touching the project. It's a hobby. I shouldn't stress myself out about it. It's mostly for me to have fun. But I do like making progress, and having the Sunday dev streams has allowed me, even on like days where I'm like, I just want to keep playing, you know, another video game, or, you know, watching anime or doing something else, having the dedicated stream is like a way of keeping me constantly doing at least 4 hours each week of dev work. So it has been, you know, progress steady, at least in that regard. At the very least, we're doing 4 hours a week. I want to be doing more, but you know, sometimes life gets in the way, and it is a hobby. Okay, the other option, rather than making this ID unique every single time, is we could instead try to we could try deleting the prop, which realistically, we're turning it off right now. It would be better to delete it. It's just not something we do a ton of, mostly because this is one of the few spots where we're actually dynamically spawning stuff. Most of the time when we are disabling things, it's only for that room, and there's only one instance. But perhaps here, this is on closing the UI. This set activity ability effect perhaps should instead be a remove prop. What would that look like? I suppose it could just be a destroy call. It could be that straightforward. Amorphous also redeemed a stretch before heading out, so I do want to go to standing desk mode for a little bit. That does mean that we will need 30 seconds to activate the rising desk and move microphones and yada yada. But honestly, I've been sitting a good chunk of the day anyway, so doing some standing for a little bit is probably a good idea regardless. So I'll be back in just a second. We're just gonna raise the desk up. All right, I think we are in a good spot. Maybe could move the mic up slightly and then adjust the pop screen, not hitting the mic. Still not hitting the mic. Okay, cool. We are good to continue. Magnus also says, can't believe you haven't set your PNG tuber to get slightly taller when you raise the desk. Would be funny. Not a bad idea. Okay. So, let's see if we can make a new type of ability effect that deletes a prop. I'm going to call that a cutscene effect. And I don't think we've ever created a sequence step for destroying something. So destroy object ability effect. This may have major ramifications. I'm not sure if my system is set up to really handle this type of behavior. We're still going to give it an entity ID, but we won't need to worry about giving it a active. So I guess entity ID is at least one level of setup that we're going to need to be worried about. Let's go take a look at our sequence steps. Close down all the audio stuff. Go into sequence. I don't know if this is cutscene related or more backend. Maybe this is more backend. We just don't have a backend folder for the ability effects, which maybe is a problem in and of itself. What did I just copy? That's not that complicated. We'll use that as a base. Destroy object sequence step. Yeah, this one's super spooky. Object. This is not a good reference, actually. We should go find one that actually... Oh, set active should basically do what we want. Same idea. I have not been keeping up on making sure that my sequence colors are accurate. But let's assume that it should be the same color as set active. Okay, so this is going to take in, no, this is going to take in an entity ID. It won't take in an active and won't have an active ID associated with it. Should only need one string, and we will also let you give it an object if you so choose. That should be a fair constructor for this as well. And then a list of objects, I suppose, could also be fine. Make sure that we keep updating the constructor names. And then here, instead of doing object active, it's going to be destroy. Do we need using Unity engine? No, we have the engine. Is it not just destroy object? It has been a while since I have written this function. We're going to do a quick Google search on the side. Destroy Unity. Just capital D destroy. Yeah, I'm not wrong. That should just be the call. Why is it complaining about it? Oh, this is a dot object, and this is not an object. No, it doesn't like that. How do I do this if I don't have a mono behavior or an object to work with? Yeah, this assumes that I'm calling this from a mono behavior, but in this situation, I don't have a mono behavior. What is it complaining about here? Cannot be accessed with an instance. Okay, are you saying I can just do object.destroy then? There is some ambiguity with Unity object and some other system-based ones. Okay, so that's good enough. So because it's not a mono behavior, it won't have destroy inherently, but if we do Unity engine.object.destroy and then call it on this game object, that should be okay. Missing a bracket. Okay, okay. At the very least, we know that we want to update the entity manager to no longer have this ID either. Do we even have that functionality? Again, we never delete stuff normally. We usually repopulate the entire thing from scratch. So we don't really ever remove an entity. Yeah, we've never needed that function before. And it's because at a very fundamental level, everything in our engine is inside of a scene, and we unload the entire scene and load up a new scene. So we never need to worry about and then when we load that new scene, we basically wipe this entire list of entities, we clear it and reprocess all the objects again at the start, which this is a bit, there's a performance hit here, but I keep trying to tell myself, don't, optimize unless there's actually a problem, and there has not been a problem. But we can, if we need to, we could always rebuild this to be a lot faster, but it has not been necessary. So here, what we could do is on remove, if entities contains the entity ID's hash ID, then we could do entities.remove, given that key. And then here, this warning could be trying to remove this entity ID without, but not in entities. Sure. That should work. And so then we can do remove. Trying to figure out how we actually get the entity ID at this point. We have it stored, because internally we're going to have, well, that's not guaranteed to be true. If the entity ID list is 0, we could have used these constructors and directly given it an object. Okay, so technically the safest way to make sure that we do this correctly is to do get component entity on the object and grab the hashed ID. And then we can do entity manager dot instance dot remove entity. Oh, you know what? Actually, I kind of like that. So we don't even need to pass in the ID. We just give it the entity object. So we assume actually that's a bad assumption. We should do a if game object try get component, and then this way we may not have an entity on the object we're trying to destroy, but if it does have one, words are no longer looking like words again. Okay, entity. Yeah, this is better. So when we loop through to destroy all objects, we will check to see if that object has an entity ID associated with it, and if it does, remove it. This does probably fail in a bunch of other ways where other systems might be referencing that object we're about to destroy, and I may not be cleaning it all up. But again, I think this system should really only be used here. I say that, but if I'm adding this to the loot pickup cutscene, this will end up being used everywhere in the game. What is the problem here? We never finished hooking this up. We went to make the sequence step, but we never came back here to do the correct hookup on this side. Cool. All the bugs were taken care of. Oh, I missed the hydrate request, or the redeem. Thanks for folks hanging out today. Appreciate people hanging as I work through some of these problems. It's been a minute since we've had so many viewers, but I'm gonna keep doing my thing and focusing and just talking through what I'm doing. All right, so in theory now this should work. The only thing we're still missing is part of the populate for the ability. When we spawn interactable, well, let's go look at loot in here. What are we doing? Spawn on enter ability. This will now need to do a similar setup for the destroy object sequence, no, ability effect. Okay, do this, do this. And then instead of a, oh, I copied the wrong one. This one. All right, find the destroy object effect. If it's not equal to null, set the ID to whatever the on enter data's prop ID is. Cool. So now this should function with either turning off the prop or with deleting the prop. I'm slightly scared to see what exactly is going to break, because again, we don't normally delete objects. So I imagine this could cause a bunch of really odd, weird bugs, or it just works. I'm hoping for the latter, just to be clear. Okay, so we're gonna come in here. We're gonna hit this slime. We're gonna walk here. At this point, it should have deleted that chest prop. So now if we spawn a new one, defeat this enemy, it'll spawn a new prop. I'm curious to see if that's actually true before we even go any further. So if we go here and look at this prop, there is a steel chest here under the floor object, which is the tile essentially. But only one. And this is mini slime spawn loot. And then if we go back into the game view and we step here, we should see that this object gets deleted. And we do. Okay. That looks to be working. Similar kind of problem here on the mini slime. You can see that again, we don't normally clean stuff up because usually there's only one instance of each character, and once you leave the scene, it just gets removed and recreated anyways. So in this particular scene where we're spawning an infinite amount of them, it starts to look bad, but shouldn't be a problem in the game. Regardless, this looks okay. I'm willing to leave this on, and we'll see if we run into any problems. Yeah, that's just working. Okay. And then if we come over here, look into the pool, we now have 6 crystals from all the enemies that we defeated. Cool. How did we get here? We were looking at Final Fantasy X spheres as reference. And I think we found that bug when we were demonstrating, and I got distracted. But we fixed the bug, so we can come back here. So if we take the tangent all the way back from where it branched, this is where we were last at. So we were looking at trying to set up our own items that would be required to unlock different parts of our grid. So interestingly, Final Fantasy X opts to group each of its items into basically 3 primary categories for stats, with luck kind of being on the outside. And then I kind of feel like the ability stuff is almost separate in and of itself because it is more rare than the other ones. You don't have abilities every other node, but you have a lot of stats. So if we take a look at our grid, part of the problem we're running into is in the current design, I don't actually give out the forest, or sorry, in the forest, we don't give out a magic ability. We start with only physical based ones. And because of that, I've been steering away from giving any magic power, magic defense, or MP as stats. So we kind of only have what would be the equivalent of power spheres if we were to take the system 1-to-1, which I don't think I want to do. The other option is we break it up more so that we have a item per stat. So instead of grouping them into a couple of categories, we could have a item that is required to unlock strength spheres or strength nodes, and then have a item that is required to unlock health nodes, and an item that is required to unlock strength nodes. That creates a lot of item bloat. I mean, the whole reason we're looking at this is because I want something to give the player. So item bloat isn't necessarily a bad thing, at least in terms of that goal. It would definitely give us a lot more variety of things to give the player. All right, rather than spend a ton of time thinking about it, we're just going to pick a lane and we're going to see how it works out. So for us, we're going to have crystals and we're going to have stat crystals. And rather than separate them into categories, we're going to have a strength one, defense, HP, and one per stat, essentially. I want a big title. FF10's Sphere System. Infinite retries to defeat the Demon Lord skill item system. Wow, we almost made it all the way across the page. So at the very least, we want a stat crystal per stat, and I currently have strength, health, defense, and speed as the stats that I'm giving out at this time. Not all of which is even shown on this page. And we have a luck stat, which I don't even know if I'm going to end up using because I don't know what to do with it. Okay. Let's start with what we have. Nope, that's not the... I wanted to open here. So let's make a strength node. And we'll call this strength crystal. And I think I can have all the same properties here. Cool. We're going to do the same thing for all of these. We're going to have a defense node. And this will be a defense crystal. We will have an HP node, which will be an HP crystal. And then I currently use speed, but I don't even think the speed stat does anything. We'll call that a speed crystal. Okay. So then if I download that TSV, and we're going to put that in IT game data items. So if we open that up, open that up in VS Code, it is not updated. Did I save it in the wrong spot? Yeah, I did. Design data, TSVs. I put it in the JRPG project instead of infinite retries. There we go. Okay, so now we have all of these items. So then if we run our tool for parsing in those items, item parser, and then look at Game Foundation's inventory, we now have these crystals that have been added. Perfect. So then if we come into here and we say that this gives a strength node item, when we walk over and do the interact, it should give us a strength node item. And then we'll also check the debugger to make sure that we're actually seeing that item appear in our inventory correctly. Strength crystals times 2. Yeah, we had an amount of 2 on that one. Cool. Now, that is not going to show up here though. So we need to do a little bit of UI work so that we can actually show these items that we're setting up. So if we go into the skill screen and we're going to use the skill info as reference. Again, I want to recreate this thing, but maybe the easiest thing would be to add the crystals to this menu, because we're going to have a crystal per stat. Yeah, we need to do a UI UX pass. I'm not going to worry about it for now. We're going to use this as a base. We're going to copy this and make a new stat background. We're going to call this crystal items background is fine. And then this, instead of having information about the unit, we're going to remove all of these. And we're going to take a look at the actual crystal setup we did last time. So the crystals were down here. What was this a part of? This was a part of the ability spec, and we had item count. The thing is that this isn't even directly related to this object. It's not related to that ability spec. This is more generically just checking the item factory. Interesting. Almost all of our other UI data often references something. So the reason that we have like this under ability spec is because that we copied this one, which is checking the stored data of the current ability spec we're showing on the UI and checking that ability spec's power. And we're converting that to a string and showing it on the text object, which is here. Similarly, for the stat stuff that we just ended up copying, here it's referencing the unit as the primary parent component, and then we have a bunch of UI components that check whatever the current data is here. So unit, it's going to check that unit's display name. So if we had multiple units that we were able to go into the skill screen with, which we used to be able to in older versions or in Era of Embers version of the game, we would be able to go through multiple different unit characters and see those units and see different display names and different stats as we kind of right triggered through or went up and down through a list of units. But in this situation, we want to show some data that is non-object dependent. Like, this won't change based off of which unit you have selected or which ability spec you have selected. The items that you have will always be there and be unrelated to your current selection. How are these things being populated? So this is a unit data component. If we go look at the node screen, yeah, they're going into this node skill screen, and this data-driven parent component, which is unit info box in code, is getting refreshed but never set to anything? Really? It has to get populated somewhere. Oh, you know what? This is a global component. So it's handled and shared between the two screens. So this one is the one that initializes it and updates it based off of whatever selection you've made to that current unit. Okay. Some of this is overkill because we only have a single character for this game compared to previous ones where we had a whole team. But what do we do when we have a screen component that doesn't have an object associated with it? Interesting. because all of these have some sort of data object. Like sometimes it's like string, but they all have some generic. So what we need here is a data-driven parent component that has no data. Well, it wouldn't be a data-driven component then. So is this just a screen component and it's not data-driven? This is all under data-driven components. Oh, this is all inside of the JRPG too. Some of these base component systems haven't been put into core. They should be like generic, but they're currently embedded inside of the old Era of Embers project, which makes this slightly confusing for me mostly, but okay, well, I think I'm onto something here though. Even though I don't have a previous example of it, this feels like this is not related to a data-driven component, which is how almost everything else that we display is set up. It essentially, that screen component's information comes from something. But because this is just showing inventory data, it's not based off anything. Wait. Main menu for old Era of Embers, did this... Oh, we had done UI mockups of showing your current amount of gold, but we never actually hooked that up. I thought maybe there would be an example there. Input display? No. This is just showing static information. So it didn't have any kind of update information associated with it. Okay, interesting. Let's double check HUD. I'm just going through and looking at old stuff to see if there's any examples of a screen component that doesn't need data associated with it. No, I can't think of one. Everything usually has either just static information that it just displays text, or an image that is static and never changes, or it is based off of some sort of input or selection that the player has made. Okay, so then what do we do? We can just make a screen component. It doesn't have to be a data-driven screen component. This is the reference I'm looking for. Yes, okay. This is an example. So we do sometimes do just straight screen components that are not data-driven, but they're just a component that has information associated with it. And it looks like the earliest version was some of the elemental displays for Era of Embers, but we hadn't really done it much past that. Okay. So then in the example here of required flags, where does this get initialized? Let's go to the front end, UI, and then required flag component, find in scene. Okay. This is here on the ability tutorial. Right, okay, this is used to hide parts of the UI. How was I handling that? Because something must initialize these. This is a component. And this is how it adds itself to the callback, which is what's going to actually be calling refresh when the event happens. But where does this get initialized? Generic screen components. Generic screen components. Okay, okay. That's how we do it. Okay. Cool. Found it. There had to have been an example. I knew there had to be. So, if we come into here, we want to steal this generic screen component. And we want to put this inside of our skill select screen. And in here, we're going to make a list of generic screen components. And what did we have to do in the previous screen with those? We needed to initialize them or terminate them on close and initialize them on init. So we're going to copy this. We're going to bring this over here. We're in terminate or close. Oh, we didn't do anything on close before. Interesting. Okay. Public. We want to terminate any of those screen components, and then we want to make sure that on load, we also initialize any of them. Okay. I don't love this. How often do I do this currently? Find all of that in the project. More than I would like. Some of this is inside of Unity's libraries, though. That's probably fine. Okay. So that is initializing them and terminating them. Was there anything else that needed to be done? No, it looks like that's it for these ones. So then, if we look at where required flags is, that's under these flag components, and that is not inside of the data component section. Okay. So we're going to make a new folder, and this is going to be inventory components. And similar to a required flag component, we are going to make a item display item component. Okay. Now, the display item component is basically going to do what we did last time. We had made that ability to spec item count. I think it does something like this. So on refresh, update some text object. And instead of giving it a hard-coded value, we should be able to define the item we want to display, item ID. So for the simple version that we're trying to set up right now, that would be strength node. So let's say that's the default item we show. Probably should be like an error message, like if this is empty, you haven't set it and we should complain, but whatever. Okay, here, this is setting up callback events to refresh the screen. I bet you we could set up something similar. We could probably set up some sort of if the item has been modified. Let's go look at that test store that we had found last stream. So we can get a callback on balance changed. Looks like we can also get a callback on item added. But we're not really going to be able to get a callback on the amount changed. And this goes into a thing that I talked about pretty in depth last stream, but like I'm using Unity's Game Foundation's inventory management system as like a starting point, and it, well, I don't know, at some point I think I might replace it with my own system. That's why I say starting point, but there's also a good chance that we could just ship with it. But one of the things I'm doing that's a bit weird is rather than do what it expects, which is that you're going to just create a new item every time you want to hand someone that item. Like if you want to create a new healing potion, you create a new item. The problem with that system that they have is that it's difficult to get a count of all the items without having to get a list of all of the items of that definition and then doing a count on it. And that's probably how I should be setting it up, but right now at least I have a property on each item called amount, and I'm trying to keep a single instance of each item and just modify that property to say how many do you have. This is going to cause the system to not work the way it's supposed to, but it's kind of how I have it currently set up. So is there a way that we can do a good encapsulation here? So that if we want to modify this to be our own system, or to even just get rid of the amount system and instead, I don't know, do whatever it is that Game Foundation's expected us to do with items, we could do that easily. Yes. So here, where we're doing item factory get item by ID, on initialize, we should be able to do the same thing and then get access to a callback. How do we do that for the flags? This callback flag event, this is just an event of delegate type callback. Okay. So if we want to do something similar here for items, we could have a delegate, which is item callback. Don't know if I need to be defining this delegate like this, but I don't quite remember how all of the event-based stuff works. So we're going to just copy something that I know works. And we're going to call this item callback. Okay, and that'll be public. And so then we can do callback, and then we plus equal refresh. Okay. This is not a list, so we don't need to worry about this. We just need to do the inverse here. So we want to just remove the callback from that item. Yeah, see, I just don't know the event stuff well enough. Does this imply that there's only a single callback event? No, because we're plus equaling. So this must be smart enough to know that we're adding multiple of things. Yeah, I'm not gonna think too deep on it. I'm gonna assume that this is smart enough to know that multiple things can register. And we're not gonna validate it. We're just gonna assume that's how it works. So display item component registers with the item callback event to refresh the screen, which itself would then get the item ID again and then get its amount, which is a bit circular, but it's fine. Now we need to make sure that this get amount doesn't call that callback. We only want this to be called, I think, on set amount. Anytime set amount is called, we will want to say, hey, this item's been modified. This specific item has been modified. Please refresh the screen. And then get amount never actually calls set. No, it never gets into any of that stuff. Yeah, so that callback will not be recursive. It won't call itself. So then we can go back into the skill screen prefab, specifically the infinite retries version. And inside of the crystal information one, we can drag this down. Sure. Display item component. If I give it no prefix, it'll just be the amount. Okay. And then in here, this will need a list of generic screen components. This is doing get component on each individual one that's placed in here. So it assumes that each object only has a single screen component associated with it. Can I do get components? Yeah, that'll give me back a list. I kind of like that more. Because I don't think I want to... Normally we stack all of this stuff on different... or like we stack it all on like the root. And I kind of like doing the same thing here. Yeah. Okay. Let's try just those two to start. So we're going to change this to be strength crystals, which is too long for this. UI pixel pushing is not what I thought we were doing today, but I guess it is, if this is what I wanted to set up. Let's drag this down a little bit. Let's come into here. Let's grab the whole attack thing. Let's increase the width of it. No, one level higher. Let's increase the width. Let's just say 100. And then we can come back up to here. We can drag this over to the middle. We can change this from attack text to text and this to number. Instead of text, more accurately, this can be name. And we'll change this to strength. And then here, this can still be strength crystal. But it can be 5 to the left, -5 down is fine, and 52 in length. Could probably be a little longer, let's say 60. And then number, we're just going to bring this in a bit so that it doesn't ever clip. And does that give me enough room for 3 digits? It does. I don't know if we'll get to 3, but that's enough. Okay, then we can delete all these other ones. And then now that we have one working version, we can copy and make a new version here. We can turn back on the vertical layout group. We can do upper left instead of center. Maybe upper center is fine. And then how was I changing the color? Was there just literally the background was removed in the other ones? Yeah, I just disabled the background on every other one. So this becomes defense. And then we just disable the background. Toggle back on the layout group. Perfect. That seems fine. And then this one becomes defense crystals. Again, as soon as I built this out, I'm like realizing a better way to do it would be to have like crystals at the top, like as a title for this, and then like strength 10, defense 10, like rather than saying strength crystal, defense crystal over and over again. But we'll figure that out. I can't remember if I hit the hydrate redeem for Magnus earlier, so we're gonna hydrate again. Can't hurt. All right, so the defense crystals, strength crystals, these should be set up. They should function as long as I drag this number into here. Okay. And then I want to drag the crystal background into our list of generic components. And for this screen in particular, we're going to make this smarter, and we're going to have this be a list of screen components. And these screen components, this becomes screen component game objects. And then we do screen component game objects dot get components I screen component. And then we can do a for each I screen component in. Actually, do we even need to store this? We could just do it here. And then we can make sure to do our for loop. And we can then just use this value here and call terminate. Cool. And then same thing here, but instead we're calling init. Good enough. Now, if we go back into our testing ground and pick up a strength crystal, we should see this show up as 2, and this should be 0. All right, let's give... Oh, we are in the wrong scene. We're in the UI. We need to go back to the combat grounds. The next thing is going to be getting it so that we get a variety of drops. So we can test this by having a couple of different chests that are each dropping different items. But realistically, I would think it would be neat if the enemies dropped a variety of crystals. Could be something as simple as the mini slimes drop strength nodes, but the big slimes drop HP nodes. Like, that could be a way of breaking it up so that they just have one consistent type. How do we currently decide what item drops from an enemy? Is it hard-coded from last time? It must be. IT, mini slime. In here we have the loot script we added. Yeah. So right now we're currently using the on enter data, and it is this item ID. So realistically, it'd be nice if this loot script had a couple of different items that it could potentially drop with maybe some percentages associated with them. I feel like I've done that logic somewhere else before. I want to say that era we had different enemy drops, but it was based off encounters. Okay, let's stay focused. Let's test this. Okay, so test this first before we go digging around. So we have 0 and 0 for strength and defense crystals. If we come back over here and we pick up this, which should have 2 strength crystals in it, the game breaks. Is that not how you do this? I didn't actually check to see... yeah, it is wrong completely. That should work better. Cool. Again, don't fully remember how the event stuff works, but because I've done it elsewhere in the project, at some point in the past, we can copy it, and we can use our own code as reference. Figure it out once, and then build on it forever. Probably not a good strategy, to be honest with you, but that's how this hobby project has worked out. Just keep building. Okay, found the strength crystals, no errors, no blowing up. Come into here. We now see 2 strength crystals. And then if I use a strength crystal, we'll need a skill point in order to be able to buy the node. But if we defeat this guy and then come into here, we can then Oh, this node isn't associated with the skill crystals, or sorry, these new crystals. It's still based off this generic one. So that's the other half of this. We need to not only make this be a new item, we need the nodes to actually be associated with that item. So if we go look at our data for that, come into here, let's do node loader. Let's make sure we load ability slash. Let's just load bash and then load slash to make sure that everything is set up correctly. It is. So if we look at the strength nodes, let's say this one, it is a stat node of stat type attack. And last time we added to the ability spec, I believe, ability spec. In here we added attempt purchase, checks to see if this hard-coded item can be consumed. So what we should do instead is do node.get required item. Which will have information about what it is and what its stat type is. Okay, so then if we do public return to me a string get required item, by default we're going to have it return the generic one while we're getting this set up. To have everything have something specific, we're going to start with that generic ID as the base one that everything will use. Where's ability spec gone? Oh, it's over here. Blind. All right, this ID. So we're going to use this as the default return type. And then here, similar to process type, we're going to have a case statement for the ability node's type. And then internally, honestly, we could probably do this separately. Get stat required item. And then get required item can in turn require the item that is needed for that specific stat. So we can do, for now at least, strength node, defense node, and HP node. As for the other ones, we are going to just do the generic as the base return. We're also going to put it here just to be safe. Okay, cool. So then all of this stuff goes away and becomes unnecessary. For now, it'll all just end up going down here and returning the generic one. And honestly, that's all we should need to do. So it should now use the strength nodes for strength. It should use the strength crystals for unlocking strength nodes. Holy smokes, hard to describe this stuff. Just word vomit. Drixie with the hydration redeem. Appreciate you, wife. Context there, Drixie is my wife, in case people are not familiar with the Tolhi lore. Is that the right way to say that? It feels like the right way to say that. Okay, so now if we come over here and gain a level up, and we'll defeat the enemy for good measure. We should not be able to buy this node. Okay. If we come over here and pick up this crystal, we should now have one generic crystal. Ah, we're still able to buy it. What did I not do? Did I forget? Yeah, I failed to come into here and actually set this part up. So this should now be node get required item. That's what I missed. Okay. And then for proper encapsulation, we'll make that private. Cool. Try that one more time. Now, once this is working, we'll have to make a item for each type of stat, but there's also like ability improvement nodes and like upgrade nodes. Those will also need their own type of item. So we can come into here, we'll double check this again. We can't buy this even though we have one skill point. If we get the generic crystal, we can still buy it. What did we do wrong? What did we do wrong? Using the control debug. Okay, we don't care about what item we find here. Yeah, that found the generic one. Defense node? Why are we not hitting... Did I not save? Oh my goodness. Chat, we're losing it. Okay, so now we've successfully saved the file. We should be able to see that when we come into here, we can defeat this enemy. We will gain a point of slash, a skill point in slash. We will get the crystal. We will come over here. We cannot purchase this, hopefully. Okay, we find the ability type. Oh my goodness, still punched it in wrong. Okay. Typo after typo. Misread starting node as stat node. This should not be the hard part of this stream. Of all the pixel pushing and everything else, this should not be the part that takes like 5 minutes to test the one small change. Okay, for real, final time. We defeat this enemy while gaining a skill point. We walk over here, we get a crystal shard, we come back to the pool, we click on this, we click this button, and nothing happens, which is what we want. Oh wait, we hit a breakpoint. Maybe something happens? Okay, strength node is returned. Should have found the node, strength node? Strength node was found with an amount of 0, I would assume. Can consume. Get amount. Oh, we have gone too far down the rabbit hole. I just want to see. Amount in inventory. 0. Okay, perfect. So we do not have any, so it fails. That is what we're looking for. We're going to get rid of the breakpoints. All of the breakpoints. Okay. So yeah, we cannot buy this. Even though we have the generic crystal, we cannot buy it. But if we come over here and we get the strength crystal, now we can purchase this. This did not update though, which is unfortunate. So, why? Now we'll add a breakpoint here. We should also make sure that the skill select screen this initializes the screen components it finds, and now it's 1. Oh, I see what's happening. When we go to the next screen down, we're terminating the screen components, which means that it internally is removing the item callback. Okay. Simple fix. We're going to take this whole item crystal background section and we're going to pull it out of skill info and we're going to put it into node info, because I think it shouldn't need to go up and down. It should be able to just live down here. We can then disable... Yeah, let's disable the basic one, because we shouldn't need this one over here anymore. And that means we also get to remove this component. We're gonna first click it to find it in the script. Yep. And we no longer need this script entirely. The item count is now handled by our generic components. And then we can come into the crystal ones. Just here, custom item backgrounds. Delete this, delete this. Crystal items. Just gonna rename some stuff for clarity. Crystal text parent. We're gonna grab another one of these. Turn off this one's background, turn on this background. We'll leave this as strength. And then this can become generic for now as just a spot to track the amount of generic crystals we have. This becomes simple. Generic. That's too long. We'll just call it crystals, because this is the basic one we're using. And then this will need another component. That will point to numbers, and then this is now strength. Okay, defense, strength, generic. And that is the ID for the generic crystals. Okay, cool. And this will eventually go away once we have made it so everything else has a crystal associated with it. Then we're going to move the generic setup that we made inside of the skill screen, skill select screen. We're going to move all of this over inside of the nodes skill screen. So same idea here. We're going to have a list of generic components. We'll copy over the close. And we will copy over this function. Okay, then this doesn't need this anymore, so we can remove it from here. I wonder, all of these are based off of like a generic like menu screen that internally is doing a bunch of like open and close stuff on like menu components and stuff. I wonder if some of this generic component logic, once I've refined it, should go inside of there. So any screen can have a list of generic components it might want to update, so that I don't have to write this every single time. That seems like it could be good, but I'm going to give that some thought. Okay, now we come back over into here. This should have a list of generic components appear on it, and we can now set it up to be this new one. And this is all so that we can actually have these update as we use them. So if we use a strength crystal, I want the items on the right to update immediately. Cool. We're going to grab the strength crystals. So we see we have 2 strength crystals and 0 regular crystals. We pick up the crystal shard here. Now we have 1. Cool. So then if we come over to this one and we buy it, this automatically updated because of our event callback system. All right, so that is mostly working. If we want to add more, we can. So we could go into here, and we can make another list. Disable the background for visual clarity, hopefully. This can become HP crystals. Cool. So those are the 3 crystals that we have hooked up. And we could add more for each of the different stats. Next thing is probably looking at modifying the loot script so that enemies can have a variety of drops. So instead of just dropping one type of item and exactly one item, we could have it be a % chance of specific items. Let me do a quick look around in our data for monsters. Encounters. Sorry, I will bring it on screen as soon as I find it. No. We have an old system. Like, this is how we did random encounters in Airvembers, where we would have like, this is the fight ID, and then it would have a number of monsters, and these were the monsters that would appear in that fight. I thought that I had built in a system where these could have drops associated with them. We're going to do a little bit of archaeology and go digging. So if we go, what would it even be? Complete results. That's the keyword. Result. Combat victory result screen. This is a UI screen that would appear after Era of Embers based off your victory results. And this had a series of items in it. Get combat rewards. Enemy IDs. Oh, it's based off the enemies, not the encounters. Back to the design sheet. Yeah. On each enemy, I would assign it an item ID and then a number of tickets. So if it had 100 tickets, then, and it was the only item, then it would just get picked. If you had 2 items and one had 100 tickets and another one had 300 tickets, then that would be its chances of being picked in the lottery, essentially. And that's how I was doing it. I don't know if I would keep it this way. The lottery system is kind of like backwards, because in order to find the probability of the item, you need to actually like add up and divide. So if you had one item that had 100 tickets and another one that had 100 tickets, then the total of these two is going to be 200. So if you want to find out what the chance of getting one over the other is, this equation's pretty straightforward. Hopefully you can see that 100 out of 200 means there's a 50-50 chance of getting either item. But if we have 100 versus 300, then there's 400 total. Then there's a 75% chance of getting this one and a 25% chance of getting this one. So again, pretty straightforward. But if we do something like 100 and like 550 and then 50, and maybe we just reorder it this way. Now these all add up to 700. So what are the odds of getting the item that has 50 tickets? Well, it's going to be equal to this number divided by this number. So a 7% chance? Is that right? I don't know. I think so. If we do this one divided by this one, that's saying it's like a 14% chance? Yeah, I guess. And then if we do this divided by this, it's an 80% chance that you get this one. That, again, these probably seem right, and they add up to 1. So, but it's just not, as soon as you start adding multiple items, the system gets way harder to understand. It works from a programming standpoint, but from a design standpoint, it's kind of annoying to try and like figure out what all of these different things are. I'm just gonna do a couple of different deletes. The problem is if you start with like, okay, I have 3 items. I have item 1, item 2, and item 3, and I want to say that I want this one to have a 50% chance of dropping. I have to then do the math of like, if I say I want this one to have a 7% chance, then as the person inputting the information, now I have to be like, oh, I got to make sure that when I add the 3rd item, that it adds up to the remainder of these 2. So like this one requires the designer to do math to make sure that everything has a proper percentage add up, whereas the ticket system allows you to just put in a number and you can say, I don't know, this one's like 75 and this one's like 100 and this one's like 500, and that will just determine some probabilities. It will just work. I don't know, maybe there's a better system, but regardless, we have this already functional. So if we go look at how this worked, we had a choose item function. Yeah, this adds up all the tickets, then does a roll for the total amount of tickets, and then it goes through and finds if the drop chance tickets is less than the roll, then this is the item you picked. That seems broken, actually. Reading over this old code, I don't think this needs to be more complicated than this, doesn't it? Yeah, this doesn't work. Because this implies that if the number you roll is less than... Yeah, you need to know the range of each one. Anyways, I can fix this, but this is a good base to start on. We're at time, though, for our 2-hour dev streams. We are going to take a break and have dinner and be back in 2 hours from now. So at 6 p.m. PST, we'll be back for part 2, where I'm probably going to work on getting some sort of loot system hooked up to the enemies so that each enemy can have a set of items that can drop from it. And we're going to see where we get to from there, because there's other work that I still want to do on the skill screen. So yeah, we might do some design work when we get back. Maybe we'll sit down and we'll take a look at trying to update some of these nodes and maybe start kind of balancing some stuff a little bit based off of what we've built with the items. I don't know, I'll give it some thought over dinner, but we'll be back in 2 hours and we will continue working on getting these items hooked up to be required for the skill screen, as well as getting enemies to drop these items at some sort of % chance. For now, though, this is going to be